Hello guys, welcome back to another episode of the Whisky Diaries. Today we're going to have a very special guest talking about Bladnoch again. We have done a video before on the Bladnoch Distiller with Will, but today we're going to be talking about the single cask release that they're going to start doing every year now. So Will, can you just refresh us on like your role and what Bladnoch is, where it started and so on, just to refresh our viewers?
Sure. So I'm the commercial director for Bladnoch Distillery, the only Australian-owned Scotch whisky in history, owned by a Melbourne entrepreneur, a guy called David Pryor, who bought the distillery back in 2015. It wasn't running for about 10 years, so rebuilt it, brand new equipment at the distillery, started distilling again in 2017, and re-released a range of Bladnoch whiskies and our blended whisky, Pure Scott. And when we bought the distillery, had a few thousand casks from the previous owner, and that's how we're able now to release aged single malts like this one today.
Yeah, so Bladnoch says on the label, obviously it says 1817, but doing some research and people might know that obviously licensed distilleries didn't start until like the 1920s, 1830s. So these guys, they were producing whiskey. Is this the establishing date, or is this like where they were kind of like illegally distilling at the time?
Yeah, so no, they were one of the first ones to get an actual legal distillation license to distill in the mid-1820s. McClellan Brothers, I've even seen at Bladnoch, we've got the original deed for the land in 1817, so you can see when they bought the land and started building. And they basically were one of the few in the lowlands who stuck around, despite, as you know, when all these licenses came in, some people headed for the hills, up to the highlands to distill illegally, but no, we've been running as a distillery now for over 200 years.
Yeah, awesome. And then recently you got Nick Savage as your master distiller. Nick Savage, for those who don't know, used to be the master distiller for Macallan. So can you tell us about, is this his project?
Absolutely. So yeah, Nick joined us in July 2019. One of his first jobs when he joined us was to go through the full archive of casks and really get a full picture of the kind of whiskies that we had available. When he was doing that, he found around about 25 casks at the time, which he thought these ones are particularly special. And those are the ones that will form our single cask series for the next 5 years, 5 bottles a year, five casks a year for a total of 25.
That's awesome. Okay, so we're going to go and start talking about the actual whiskey itself. So we've got basically it's a release that is 5 casks themselves, 5 single bottles with 5 different barrels. So the first one that we got is a red wine hot set. So it says on the label here that this comes from California. It's a Californian red wine. What sort of red?
So this barrel is a Syrah barrel, called Shiraz in Australia as a Californian Syrah. And for those of you who've tried other Bladnochs, you'll know that we love Californian red wine. We've got a few other expressions like our Samsara and our recently discontinued 17-year-old, both use Californian red wine. And this is actually one of the batch of casks that are used to make the Samsara. So that means that if you have tried it, you would have had one of these batch of casks. But this is really one of the most uniquely interesting red wine barrels that Nick found. And this one here, of course, is...
And well, we have done videos in the past in the channel talking about wood and different casks and different barrels and the effect of wood. This one in particular is a hogshead, which is a little bit bigger than a normal American oak barrel, which means there's a little bit less surface contact, which means it's just not as intense. So Nick Savage picked obviously this cask in particular, and then he went and did the non-chill filtered and natural color. Yeah.
So both of these are actually across the entire Bladnoch range. We never add color and we don't chill filter our whiskies. They're always at either 46.7% or cask strength like this one. But it's a kind of a Bladnoch philosophy that we always maintain as much integrity from the malt.
Yeah, so non-chill filtered, we have talked about in the past, but if you want to refresh the viewers.
Yeah, so basically once a whiskey is chill filtered, it really maintains a real clarity in the glass. It's really a visual thing, but it does take out some of the body of the whiskey, and it's really just done mostly with lower ABV whiskies, but something that, because it's above 46%, we don't have to chill filter. And this one here is a cask strength. I think is it 40?
Yeah, this is a 56% ABV, so it's pretty strong. So non-tube filter was created around the 1980s, 1970s, just because whiskies have natural oils in them. So when you put ice in them, if they're not chill filtered, some of them can go cloudy. So people back in the day thought that the whiskey would be off or wouldn't doesn't look as good, so the non-chill filter got introduced just to make whiskey look a little bit nicer on glass. But like Will says, is actually take a little bit of flavor out of the actual whiskey. Okay, so without further ado, we're going to start trying this one. So with the hogshead and wine, I'm expecting, this is actually my first time trying this whiskey. There we go.
Okay. Beautiful. That's a healthy pour of cask whiskey to get me going. This is actually my favourite. This cask number 1. So I'm really happy about this here. So yeah, this one here was actually exclusively for the visitor centre. We released these in April, but of course we couldn't open the visitor centre because of COVID. So we decided to release these online just for the UK. So essentially, because these are single casks, it means that the number of bottles depends on the size of the cask.
Yeah.
This one here, I think, is about 289. I think is the number of bottles in this run.
This run is 289. This is 179 out of 289.
So what that means is that we had to choose where the bottles went, and for this one, it was only available at our visitor centre. There were 20 sets that came to Australia, and of course, you guys have one of those sets, and I think you're the only bar, in fact, in Queensland to have our full set of single casks, but. There was only 20 bottles outside of these that made their way to Australia. And this was
distilled in January 2008 and bottled in March 2020. So this is about 12 years old, which has a lovely, lovely nose for a 12-year-old as well. It's just actually right toffee and caramel. And it doesn't feel that strong, like a 56 ABV. We have tried whiskies in the past where like even 50%. We're like, that's really strong. This one actually is quite smooth and easy drink, and obviously it's always good to add a little bit of water to the whiskey.
This one here really, I think, appeals to someone who likes a sweeter style of whiskey. There was a lot of wine barrel impact that went into this one, so I think the fruits are really dominant, more than the oak impact of the American oak cask.
It actually has a really good body, just quite thick as well, and the meat palate as well. It's actually delicious. Yeah, this is one of my favorites so far. Going into the next one. Obviously, this is Single Cask release number 2, and it's a sherry butt. Can you tell us a little bit about that? What sort of sherry?
Sure. Obviously, this one is an Oloroso sherry. This has been most of its life in a refill sherry, and then has spent a few years in a first fill sherry butt. So a butt is 500 litres, thereabouts, and of course they all come from Spain. And we source our sherry butts from, when we made this single cask, from a range of tonelleria in Spain, but now with Nick on board, he's got some great relationships with some various bodegas in Spain to provide us with some very good quality.
Yes, obviously Nick being part of Macallan back in the day, and Macallan had such a good barrel program. Obviously, he will bring a lot of contacts. I'm really interested to see in the future, because obviously this is new, so you just basically put new whiskey, but this is previous on that, so should be quite interesting as well. This is 51.1%, cask bottle 376 out of 661, so this is a little bit of a longer, obviously, because the barrels are bigger. And then
so bottle number 2, quite a lot of these bottles we sent to China. There's a lot of love for sherry cask matured whiskies in Greater China, and that was sort of the biggest market. They've got some of cask number 2. Of course, again, only 20 bottles made it to Australia, and you guys got one of those. So and this, but in particular, is I think probably most similar to the style of whiskey that we're going to be making in the future in Bladnoch. We've got a lot of sherry casks that we're laying down at the moment.
That's pretty cool.
Since Nick joined, probably 40% of the barrels that we're putting down are sherry casks.
Yeah, right, because you Bladnoch in general has a very strong American oak.
Correct. Yeah, a lot of bourbon.
A lot of bourbon. Any distilleries in particular or you just getting like
For the bourbon casks?
For the bourbon casks?
We buy through a broker, so there's a mixture of different distilleries, and when you go to Bladnoch, you see the stamp of the distillery on the end of the barrel. It comes from all over Kentucky, but all good quality bourbon barrels.
Yeah.
So.
This one is, December 2006 and March 2020, so 13 years and a half. Let's just put it, I would say 14 years by just looking at the date. So the color is very interesting because the color is a little bit lighter, and you can see that obviously in the picture there. But obviously you notice that because of the cask size difference, the bigger the cask, the less influence the wood has. So obviously less color.
I think that this often sherry butts have got a deeper colour certainly than bourbon cask. If you've seen our 10-year-old, which has a very, very light colour, but you're right, compared to that red wine barrel, which has got a lot of colour from that small barrel size.
And the flavour, the smell is already completely different to the other one.
So much more influence of that oak, European oak, straight away.
Straight away, and a lot more spiciness, like Christmas pudding. That's crazy.
Almost like a butter caramel, really.
Oh, and it has, even though it's actually, what's the difference on the ABV? This one is 56.
About 5% more,
Yeah, 5%, this one is stronger than this one in ABV, but it feels a little bit more spicy, a little bit more.
Definitely the spice. Christmas spice almost.
Yeah.
So, each of the single casks have 3 kind of key descriptors on the side. I think that tasting notes, I've seen them like half a page of flavours and you kind of name everything. So we always stick to what are 3 flavours, and we hope that
which is
that
really
helps.
cool because they have it on the side of the bottle. This one says coffee cream and almonds, which I can actually recognise that. The other one that we just have in here as well, this one is red berries, sweet oak and chocolate, which is reasonable.
Nick, you can tell he is a big fan of candy, of sweets.
Oh yeah.
And often in his tasting notes there'll be sweets, and sometimes they're the ones that are only available in the UK. And we have to talk to our distributors in other countries, and they're like, "What is this tasting note?" And we have to send them a picture of this is the candy that it reminds. But you can tell Nick's got a sweet tooth.
Yeah. Well, another interesting fact that I was talking to someone the other day. Apparently, he's very, very tall.
He is. Yeah, he's like, I think 6'8", 6'9". He's definitely can see across the barrels in the warehouse. That's for sure. So.
That's delicious. You can definitely tell the sherry influence on that.
And again, the water really helps.
Opens up. Water always opens up the whiskey. So batch number 3. This is a full bourbon cask, American oak.
That's right.
Again, non-chill filter like all of them. Distilled in 2006 and bottled in 2020. So 13 and a half years again.
That's right.
And then this one is a big one. This is 59.6 ABV. That's almost 60% ABV.
Yeah. So this is a serious whiskey.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about it.
So cask number 3 was the one that most of the bottles made their way to Australia. We released 2 years ago now a special edition for the Whisky Club, Australian Whisky Club, a 10-year-old cask strength. Now that was a vatting, so that was a whole lot of casks put together, but it was extremely popular, and it was one of the ways that a lot of Australians discovered Bladnoch. So we figured, well, if we're going to choose a cask to be, really pushed in Australia, let's make it the cask strength bourbon, and it's gone very well. I mean, they all sold out in a couple of days, but it's very, again, like you said before, very classic of the old Bladnoch flavour. A lot of American oak, a lot of bourbon, but it's a big, spicy, heavy American oak influence.
Yeah, and then when you say, obviously being an Australian-owned company and stuff, do we get first dibs on this sort of stuff, or
that's right? Always Australia will get a bit of preference.
A little preference. Well, we'll hope so, because Australia, obviously, for the rest of the market, so the rest of the distilleries, usually Australia comes almost last. This has been changing in the last few years, but usually that was the way it was.
Yeah, often they kind of place Australia as one of the top 10 single malt markets in the world in terms of how much they're drinking. We, of course, have very, very high taxes on alcohol in Australia, which makes it really tough for for companies to choose to import here. But there's some great small distributors now that are bringing in really interesting stuff.
Yeah, and that's interesting because these bottles are not that expensive. What they will go like 200, 250?
Between $220, $250, yeah.
Yeah, and they're like 50, 59 ABV and all that stuff. Obviously, the higher the ABV, the higher the tax, and the more expensive the bottles, unfortunately. But yeah, this is actually really reasonable price for what the whiskies are.
Small batch, pretty collectible, but also we want people to actually open them and drink them.
Yeah, So the rule of thumb always is buy two.
Well, with only 20 sets, that wasn't so easy to do.
In this case, it's not. That's what I'm blown away so far is that each one individually are completely different, and this is the effect that wood has on the whiskey, right? Because they're all the same new make spirit,
correct,
put in different barrels, and it's just incredible the difference on flavour and noses for that matter. This brings on the toffee and the caramel that you get used to with American oak.
There's a real consistent thread of soft sweetness to Bladnoch, though. It doesn't matter which it is. There's a little
that back. Yeah, that would be the new make, and a 59% ABV. You can really taste like the regional spirit as well. It really carries through, like pretty strong.
Yeah.
Strong flavour. It's a really beautiful whiskey. Just really showcase what Bladnoch can do. It's a really cool.
Yeah, no, this one was particularly popular in Australia. So. Yeah.
Do you reckon that has to do with the fact that Australians in general do like it's a higher bourbon market than single malt?
Look, I think that Bladnoch's success in Australia for sure is related to an Aussie palate liking something that's quite soft and sweet, like a bourbon one. But there's a lot more out there than just our particular style that reflects, I guess, the range of palates of Australian consumers. But I would say the popularity of Bladnoch here is definitely related to the fact that it's a very kind of light, gentle style, underpinning the impact of the barrels. And
Bladnoch has been growing in the last few years massively.
Yeah. We're now at the point where we basically sell every bottle that we can produce each year. So we're pretty much at 100% capacity, and it will mean that basically all the Bladnochs, of course, not just these, are going to be on allocation. And unfortunately, that's just because we don't have a lot of stock. So
but you started to develop a barrel program as well, right?
Correct. Yeah. So we have a way in which people who can actually buy a barrel of Bladnoch,
that's
and
cool.
Not only that, they can actually select the exact barrel that they want, and they can fill it themselves at the distillery. We also are building a whiskey club at Bladnoch, where if you own the barrel, you have your own locker and your own space, and we're just kind of building a really cool place to hang out. So once we can travel, we'll love to take more people to.
Yeah, that's awesome. So if you buy the barrel, Bladnoch will take you to the distillery?
You go get yourself to the distillery, but with how many barrels are you going to buy, Marty? That's the question. But it's what we want to do is really bring more people to the actual site. I think that once you visit Bladnoch, you can really appreciate just.
Any bars in Australia that are bought barrel or anything like that, or?
No, we have produced a special select barrel, and in fact this month with the Whisky Club here in Australia, there is a single barrel of a Bladnoch sherry cask that's
cool.
available. And I think that it comes out this weekend, and therefore it's going to have to be, people are going to have to be pretty quick to get their hands on that. Only 600 bottles of that one, and that one's going to be
so for those who don't know, the Whisky Club is a membership. Well, they don't charge a membership, but you can join for free. It's an Australian whiskey club in which you just sign in and you pay every month for whatever bottle they release. You can opt out or in, and you can pick the bottles that you want to get that month. It's a great club, and they get special editions from all distilleries as well.
We make it just for them.
Exactly.
No available anywhere else in the world.
The Lark has done it, and there's actually Glenronach and a few other whiskies as well that they actually have put on the label. They go especially down for Whisky Club, almost like an independent bottling, I guess. But it's actually a really good club. Death and Taxes and Cobbler are members of them as well. So if you're a Whisky Club member, you can come here and you get 20% off on whiskies. They actually do really cool bottles. So going to the next one, It's another one. This one is going to be really interesting because this is cask number 39 of the red wine hogshead. The first one that we did was cask 38 of the same cask, and this is going to show us like how different like barrel aging happens. Like barrel aging is really complex. It's not like just putting whiskey in a barrel, right? Like two barrels on the same warehouse on the same space will actually have completely different outcomes. So this is really interesting to see because not many distilleries do that, like put two casks on the same release, basically next to each other, like, you know what I mean?
And I think that, you know, this is, like you say, it's a great way to illustrate that, you know, there's basically a magic to barrel aging, that there's all sorts of interactive effects that go on between the barrel and the whiskey that creates, you know, distinctly different flavours, and you can see that the notes, but when we taste it, just how different it'll be from cask number one.
And this is exactly the same age, January 2008 and March 2020, so it's just 12-year-old. This one is 55.9 and this one is 55.8, I think it was, 56, so basically like 0.1 degree difference. And they're basically the cask in the distillery, they were living next to each other, which is awesome because even the color is different from those two bottles, and it's basically they were next to each other, like, you know what I mean? It's crazy. I found that really interesting personally. Anyway,
they're like fraternal twins. They're not identical twins.
Like. Fair enough. And the nose is completely different as well. Already, it's a lot more spicy. You don't have that sweetness. There's a little bit of caramel there, but it's not the same. And even the description on the side of the bottle.
So the fruit's a lot softer in there. You know, that real kind of fruit chocolate that you get in number one. Is the impact of this bit of spicy European oak is much stronger here. Yeah,
so you still get the red berries, but then you get pears and then you get nutmeg. Like this one is chocolate and caramel. This one is spicy, and they're the same, basically the same cask. It's crazy. I find that really interesting.
So cask number 4 was one that made its way into the European continent. So in Germany, Italy, Belgium, Holland, they all got some of this stock. Extremely popular, especially in Germany, which is the number one Bladnoch consuming market outside of Australia.
Yeah, right.
They absolutely love Bladnoch. We're a really good distributor there, and you know, there's just a lot of great single malt fans there that love Bladnoch. So yeah, this was the popular one for Germany.
Any plans to expand more over like Russia, Spain?
So we sell in Russia. You can buy Bladnoch all across bars and shops in Russia. We're not yet in Spain. They're a really strong blended market. They buy a lot of blended whiskey.
Pure Scott would do well.
So yeah, we were hoping to find a home for Pure Scott in Spain, but we're in 40 countries now around the world.
Oh wow,
which is pretty good. So the previous owners of Bladnoch really focused just on the UK.
Yeah.
And you know, now 40 countries around the world, you can buy Bladnoch. So.
Yeah, awesome. And then, so the majority of the whiskey that you produce goes into, obviously, the Pure Scott and the Bladnoch. Do you sell much to blends? Because a lot of distilleries around Scotland, they sell a lot to them, to different distilleries.
So we sell whiskey, for blending, but we also sell a lot to independent bottlers too. So these days, if you see a Bladnoch from an independent bottler, it's probably distilled 1990 to 1992. So they're quite old.
Yeah.
But for the first time in 2018, we started selling to independent bottlers. So in the future years, you are going to see whiskies distilled at Bladnoch from some of the major independent bottlers across the UK.
Yeah, awesome. Incredible how these whiskies taste so different from one another. The other thing that is actually quite different and intriguing from a perspective is like the bottling and the packaging from Bladnoch is very different to all single malts, especially being a distillery that is so old. Usually you will stick to like a classic normal Scotch whiskey. So
look, you're absolutely right. Bladnoch, when it was released before, came in a very classic whiskey bottle. The labels were very kind of traditional, and so when we re-released it, we completely changed everything about the packaging. You know, it's still the same great whiskey, but the bottle was unique to us. So this is a bottle shape that we own, we've created and trademarked. The lids, of course, these fantastic, solid metal lids. They're created for us in the lids are created in Austria, and they're finished with cork in Portugal. But this is sort of unique to us as well. These metal lids are
created in Austria.
That's right. Yeah, that's where the top is. So the packaging is something that kind of catches people's interest. We hope that the whiskey kind of keeps it. There's a lot of debate about packaging, about you can't eat or drink the packaging, and you're right. But when you're seeing it on a shelf, we love something that looks really good. David, before he owned Bladnoch, he was involved with packaging. That was his sort of background, and one of his first companies was a packaging company. So he's got a real eye for something that really looks and feels good in the hand.
Yeah. They're heavy, nice bottles. They almost look like a decanter, like a really nice decanter.
I never throw them out. I always want to keep the bottle and I'll use it.
They're solid, good bottles as well, and including the 10-year-old or the basic entry levels. They
correct,
still have,
all the way through.
And the lids on the 10-year-old, they're like wood.
That's right. Yeah, we have wooden lids for our kind of our core range, and then the metal lids for all of our special editions and high-end ones.
So the 15, the Samsara.
That's right.
25.
The 10-year-old.
Yeah.
So we have also a different label, as you can see. The white label is unique to the single casks, and the strip label, which has the the age, all the details. That'll be what changes every year.
So the last one that we're going to do, this is the oldest one of the lot. This is October 2005 and March 2020 bottled. So that's basically a 15-year-old, 14 and a half if you want to go exact. This one is a Manzanilla hogshead. So Manzanilla, for those who don't know, is a style of sherry. But Manzanilla in Spanish it's basically like a tea that they drink over there. And the reason why it's called Manzanilla, the sherry, is because it has those tea notes that they drink in Spain. Can you tell us a little bit about how you source this? Because this is quite unique, because Manzanilla casks are actually quite hard to age a whiskey in this sort of cask. Yeah,
sure. So, in amongst a lot of bourbons and sherries and red wine barrels, we do have a few really interesting casks. And Manzanilla, Palo Cortado, Masala, Moscatel. We've got a few, really special ones, and every year cask number 5 will be a little bit different. It'll be something which is, got a good bit of a story behind it, and Manzanilla is definitely one of those. We don't have a lot. It's not like bourbon where we have quite a lot of bourbon casks or quite a lot of sherry casks. We've only got a small handful, and so really this is again an insight, as you say, into something a bit unusual. And this Manzanilla was one that Nick tasted, and we thought, well, we could possibly turn it into a whiskey into the future and hold on to it, or we can put it into our single cask program. And fortunately for us, it's been bottled as something which we can enjoy this year. So cask number 5 is one that again made its way into Europe. There are a few European countries that took some of cask number 5. Most of it went to our visitor centre in the UK or online. This is something that's just really interesting to me, and I really like this cask.
I'm super keen as well. Manzanilla in every whiskey as well, like it always sells out. There's a lot of whiskies out there, well, not a lot, but whoever does it, and they've done it well, is Manzanilla really gives a very interesting character to the whiskey itself. As a matter of fact, the tasting notes on the side of the bottle says fresh oranges, cocoa, and Madeira cake, which is interesting because Madeira as well. Madeira is a fortified wine that comes from the Madeira Islands, and actually a lot of whiskies have been aged in Madeira cask as well. So I never personally had Madeira cake, but I'm assuming it's quite like.
I'll make you it one day, buddy. We can have a Madeira cake next time I come. And am I right? Manzanilla means little apple, right?
Yeah, Manzanilla means little apple in Spanish, but it's not related to an actual apple. It's just related to the tea itself.
It's a really kind of special nose. Obviously this cask number 2 is quite a classic sherry cask. This is something
completely different. So obviously you're building new relationships with Jerez and with Spanish wineries, and just to get new sherries, and obviously Nick bringing all these new contacts and stuff. So future looks pretty good for you, I say.
Yeah, we've actually just now, if you check out our Instagram, shameless plug to follow us on Instagram at Bladnoch Whisky. We've put up a photo recently of the casks that we've just now reserved. So as you say, the sherry process is not one that we don't just ring them up and go send us 100 casks and they send them. It takes years to season them. So we've just now laid down some casks for seasoning with sherry, and put the Bladnoch stamp in the end. So we've got some great pictures now from the Toneleria preparing the whiskey the sherry barrels for over a year into the future. So.
Yeah, so we talked about this in a previous video, and we will talk about how wood and all the barreling happens. So what really happens, to refresh you, when you ask, when a distillery says, oh, I want sherry cask or whatever it is, it's not like they just send it to you. You have to, each winery will prepare the cask distinctively to the orders of the distillery, and the sherry that goes into the barrels most of the times is actually not drinkable. Like, it's not something that they can sell later on, and sometimes, a lot of the times, it's either 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years that stays in the cask. We're talking about Pedro Jimenez here, Oloroso, Palo Cortado, like you said, Manzanilla, all those type of sherries, they give really complex and different aromas and notes to the whiskey. So it's really, really interesting, and really, really keen to see what Nick's going to do with Bladnoch in the future, because obviously he did so well for Macallan. And this one I reckon this is my favourite so far.
For me, it's always between 1 and 5, I think, because one's got
one
that
is
big
delicious as well.
fruit red wine. It's so juicy, but this one, the European oak really shines in this one so well.
Yeah. And it's not so much about the strength of the
it's
whiskey,
only 51,
but it's only 51 compared to the rest ones. But it still has that spicy, but at the same time it's light and tea-like as well. Like
the tannins. I mean, you say tea, maybe just think tea, but. Delicious whiskies, and it's really shows how different barrels, and you can see on the colours as well. They're all completely different and completely different in number
flavour.
4, it's the darkest, and then number 3 is the lightest. It's like the whole
which is
spectrum.
So no, it's incredible. So thank you very much for being with us.
That's right.
Do you want to add anything else to any more information?
One more thing I'll say, which is that if you're watching this video and it's the start of October 2020, there's only one set left of these in Australia, and the only way to get it is if you're a Whisky Club member. And as I mentioned, they've got a special release of a sherry cask, single cask we've made for them. But one of the Whisky Club members this month will win a full set, and it's the last set that we have. It's my set, so it's the last bottles that we've got. I got stitched up, and Bertie, who owns a Whisky Club, he definitely made a good, compelling case to get a full set. So the only now last remaining set of 5 whiskies that are available in Australia is Beer Whisky.
So definitely worth going into the Whisky Club. Again, we're a member with them, so if you come to Cobbler or Death and Taxes, you get 20% of all the whiskies. They're a great club to be a member of. And thank you very much for all the information, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Again, like we always say, if you have any recommendations or any whiskies that you want to recommend to review, let us know. We're happy to do it. And we'll see you next time. Salam Jabba.
Cheers.
Cheers.